Shalom, this is Rabbi Sachs coming to you from the Chai Center. Welcome to the Chai Academy. We have, yesterday we gave a class on laws, suggestions, tips on Passover, as Passover is coming this week. And today is going to be more of an understanding, a spiritual understanding. I mean, we know the story. 10 plagues. The Hebrews were enslaved. They were enslaved for 210 years. The slavery, as it went on, it got more. The Egyptians got more. And it's interesting. If you take dictators, or you take you take leaders that are despots, you'll notice it gets worse. It can't possibly get better. It gets worse, and so too happened with Passover. In Egypt, it got worse as time went on. The Hebrews were bullied and tortured more and more and more, and the Torah alludes to it. The Torah says that when the king died and a new king arose, they got it. It became okay. The new king, was completely detached from Joseph and his brothers, and the new king beat them severely. So it is. It's just human nature. It's human nature. If you have it in you, unless you tame it, unless you curb it, your flaw, your vice, will get worse unless you do something about it. It's I think it's a given. If you're if a person is a drunk, and a lush, it's going to get worse unless they do something to stop it. So Pharaoh didn't want to stop it, so it was stopped for him, and the Hebrews left Egypt, and the splitting of the sea a week later, and that's why we have the second days of Passover. The first days to celebrate the Exodus, but the Exodus is not complete while the Egyptians are still in hot pursuit, or the threat of Egyptians being in hot pursuit. So the second days of Passover, we celebrate the splitting of the sea and the complete eradication of the evil Egyptian army, military, and the guards, etc., etc. So God told us it's a biblical command. We have to talk about it every year. We cannot just think of it once in a blue moon, but rather we have to celebrate it once a year. Moreover, every single day we mention Egypt. Every single day in our prayers we mention Egypt. When we make the Kiddush on Friday night, of course, when we make the Kiddush, we hold that cup of wine. When we usher in Shabbat, on Shabbat, and of course Passover, we mention Egypt. See, Egypt is not just a thing that happened in the past, but rather Egypt is part and parcel. It's a foundation of the Jewish people, and it has to be treated accordingly. So we celebrate. So we celebrate the Passover once a year with everything that God commanded us, and rabbinically inserted, etc. And one of the things we do at the Haggadah, at the Magid section where we read the Haggadah, we read something very interesting. It says, B'chol dor v'dor, every generation, or B'chol yom v'yom, every day, it is incumbent upon a person to view themselves as if they left Egypt. Now, we understand the concept. We understand the concept of reminiscing. We understand the concept of celebrating. But what does it mean every single day? We have to Leroy says atzmo. We have to Lira says Atzmo. Every single day we have to view ourselves as if we left Egypt. What does that mean? What does that even mean? We're not leaving Egypt. I'm in Dix Hills. Where are you? So how does it make any sense? So Kabbalah says as follows: Mitzrayim, Egypt, is a geographical place on the map. Right? It is southern Israel, and the Nile runs through it, and it is unarguably a place in the map, and we have to celebrate that we left Egypt. But Egypt is not only just a geographical place or space. Egypt is a state of mind. Egypt is a state of being. The word Mitzrayim, Egypt, comes from the word Meitzar, limitations, boundaries. And so boundaries are good. We need boundaries in general. We need boundaries. Everybody needs boundaries. If we didn't have boundaries, we would we would do inappropriate things. So we need boundaries. We need borders in our country. Well, I don't know about we need whatever. So we need boundaries, but it's also we need boundaries. There are self-imposed boundaries that are not necessarily healthy, right? Just not healthy. A person tells themselves, "I can't do this. I cannot do that. I am unable to change my ways. I'm unable to stop smoking. I cannot. I have anger management issues, and that's it. I am who I am. It's not gonna stop. I'm mean. I have a mean streak, but I have to learn to live with it." These are all self-imposed boundaries. You can't stop smoking. Thousands, hundreds of thousands do. You can. You don't have to be mean. It's not too late to change. And that's the deeper message. That is a deeper message of Passover. We have to view ourselves as if we left Egypt. Every day we have to work on ourselves to leave our boundaries, self-imposed or those imposed by others. Right? If it's a negative boundary, positive boundaries once again are good. But if it's a negative boundary and it inhibits us, it restricts us from doing good, then it's a negative boundary. It's a Meitzar, it's a Mitzrayim, and we have to shirk it. And when we make, and this is brought down in Tanya, Book of Tanya, Kabbalistic Book of Tanya, when we make a concerted effort that we are going to shirk this bad boundary, this bad attribute, it says God will help us, because God helps those that helps themselves. You've heard that phrase. But when a person is inspired to do something, to go beyond themselves, God intervenes and he helps you. So every single day, we have to view ourselves as if we left self-imposed boundaries, and God will help. God helped them get out of a physical Egypt. God can help you get out of a spiritual Egypt, a mental Egypt, an emotional Egypt, and etc., whatever the limitation may be. So that's a fundamental Kabbalistic thought on Egypt. Also, by the way, that's it's brought down that we have a soul in our body. Now, the soul is a part of God. The body is corporeal, it's material, it's physical. The soul is wholly spiritual. So the soul finds itself imprisoned in a boundary. And it just has to do what this body does. So this body needs to eat. The soul tags along, no choice. The body needs to sleep, the body needs this, the body, whatever it is. And the soul is not necessarily always a happy camper. By doing things that are good, by doing things that are pleasing in God's eyes, by doing things that are the right thing to do between man and man, the soul doesn't feel imprisoned and inhibited. The soul is rather a free to soar. It is now in tandem with the body. So that's another explanation given about going out of Egypt every single day. One of the ways we're taught to help us develop this gumption to reach out to God and remove these boundaries that we have is by eating matzah, consuming matzah. So matzah has a special quality to it that on the Seder night specifically, or maybe only, matzah has the quality that it's called michla de mehamanusa. It's called the food of faith. It actually increases one's faith. Because many years ago, when the Hebrews were in Egypt, they had to bake their bread, right? And didn't have time to bake. And they had to leave Egypt and go into the wilderness. And they did. And they did. That took tremendous strength. Because it's rather the devil you know than the devil you don't. Right? They were in Egypt. They knew exactly what Egypt was. They knew the punishment. They knew the grueling, they were prisoners, etc. But they were going into a desert which was not civilized, did not have food, did not have water. And as you read, they requested food and water and they got it miraculously. But for them to follow took tremendous faith. And they brought the matzah with them. So we're taught Kabbalistically that God blessed the matzah. That when we consume it each year, it's michla de mehemanusa, the food of faith. It actually gives us the courage, the gumption, the platform, if you will, to change from a weak person that feels they cannot improve to a stronger person that knows they can improve. So it's very important to eat that matzah on the Seder night, and even if a person can eat shmura matzah, which is the hand-baked matzah, the round ones, that is even better. But any kosher for Pesach matzah will do. Now, before Pesach comes in, it's another Kabbalistic teaching. Before Passover comes in, we have to get rid of our chametz. What is chametz? Chametz, the definition of chametz, is anything that is from the 5 grains, right? Wheat, barley, oats, spelt, rye. Those are the 5 grains. And we have to get rid of any leavening agents, which comes from these 5 grains or legumes, etc. But we don't use cornstarch either, right? So these and what we do is when we take these 5 grains, because they leaven and because they leaven quickly, we make this matzah, and we don't give it time to rise. And we make it as flat as a board, and it hasn't had time to rise, and we definitely don't put yeast in it to help it. That is matzah. But we also have to make sure that our entire house is chametz free. We have to dispose of or sell to a non-Jew this leavened products that you have in your kitchen. Your cornflakes, your Wheaties, your yeast, anything and everything. Corn syrup, right? You have to get rid of it. Kabbalah explains as follows: that anything, chametz, which leavens, and anything that leavens symbolizes arrogance, complete arrogance. Whereas matzah, which is flat, doesn't rise, doesn't have any leavening agents in them, symbolizes humility. The Hebrews were humbled. They were humbled to their core. They were slaves for 210 years. Their parents, their grandparents, and their grandparents, great-grandparents, were slaves. And you have generations of slaves, you're going to be humbled. They were humbled, and it was a terrible thing. However, humility has a tremendous component to it. Humility allows one to converse, connect with God. We know that an arrogance is considered one of the worst things a person can be. Self-haughty, arrogant, full of hot air, pride that is unearned, right? Cocky. All these things are anathema to connecting with God. It says in the Talmud, as far as the arrogant person, that both he and I can't live together. With John Wayne, many years later, said, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. So arrogance is a terrible thing. Arrogance is actually a contemporary idol, because you worship yourself. You don't have time for God. You don't have place or space for God. It's all about you. Matzah is humility, recognizing that the world doesn't revolve around you, and your concentric circle does not just consist of the I. Matzah is humility. In order to foster an incredible connection with God, to be able to be Am Yisrael, God's people, we have to be humble. And we have to be humble all the time. But matzah gives us the spiritual ability to see beyond ourselves and recognize that we didn't get out of Egypt alone. It wasn't by our good looks, and it wasn't by our rebellion. In fact, it had nothing to do with us. We couldn't. We were inept because we were slaves. So the idea here, that we need to be humble, and we have to let go and let God, because that's what happened in Egypt. So likewise, a person, a human being, and on Pesach we celebrate this concept. We have to let go and let God. Not every decision are you going to make is going to be the right one, and you have to be content with that. Not everything is your control, and you have to be okay with that. Not everything is going to happen to your liking, to your persuasion. It's just not. Just not. You win some, you lose some. Do we believe it's random and happenstance? No, we believe there's God there. So if a person gets angry that it didn't go his way or her way, it's actually a denial of faith. Be humble. Recognize that there's something greater than you out there, and have faith and have trust. That's what matzah is. That's what matzah does. We drink the 4 cups. We have the 4 sons. They're also very Kabbalistically motivated. You see, a human being has 5 levels to their soul. They have the basic biological level of soul. Then you have an emotional component. Then you have an intellectual component. And then you have a spiritual component. And then you have a level that is raw godliness. Complete godliness without anything else mixed in. It's our job, by these 4 cups, to drink this wine, and we celebrate our biological level. The second cup is we celebrate our emotional, our intellectual, our spiritual. And then God helps us get to this fifth cup. The fifth cup that we place in the center. The fifth cup that they say that when Jerusalem, when the Holy Temple in Jerusalem will be restored and rebuilt, there will be a fifth cup. And that we'll drink 5 cups. That cup is the penultimate bond with God, God with God. Right? It's going to mesh like water meshes with water. So we drink 4 cups to nurture and to foster the 4 levels of the soul. And the 5th cup we place on the table in order to recognize there is a 5th level, but we cannot internalize it. It's not for us yet to internalize. We're not there yet, and we're unable to internalize it just yet. And it's interesting. By the 5th cup, we bring in Elijah. Right? We open the door for Elijah. Elijah is connected with God at an incredible level, to the point where they say Elijah didn't die like a human being dies. He was just connected with God. And because he connected with God, Elijah's no longer here. There's no body, there's no burial site that says Elijah's buried here. Elijah is the 5th cup, the connection with God. It's also an interesting thing is after 4 cups, you're usually a little tipsy. If you drink wine, your defense mechanisms are down. You're not thinking about the self. You're way more spiritual than you are physical. You're connected in a way that you couldn't necessarily be connected if you didn't internalize 4 cups of alcohol. Right? Doesn't mean you have to be drunk, but a drunk person doesn't have an ego. A drunk person can fall down and not get hurt, whereas a healthy person can trip the same trip and get hurt. It's because the ego is been squashed. It's also because you don't have these. You're not full of yourself. You don't have these defense mechanisms to try and protect your persona, because you've had 4 cups. And likewise, the 4 sons. Each one of these sons symbolize a different level of the soul, and on some level. It's interesting to note that the many years ago, I think it was the Soviet those that marched for Soviet Jewry, that the Jews should be released and allowed to practice at least their Judaism, and not be illegal, and let my people go, etc., etc. Sharansky, right? And if you right, Anatoly Sharansky, he's he is the personification of the movement. So they once said to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, this year, what we're going to do is we're going to leave a vacant chair at the table, which is to commemorate that there are Jews in Soviet Russia, in the Soviet Union, that are not allowed to have Passover. And the Rebbe's response was very out of the box. He said, heaven forfend, God forbid, there should be no empty place at the Seder. You want to help Soviet Jewry? Invite someone to the Seder. And the Rebbe concluded, and he says that by inviting someone to the Seder, who normally would not have gone to a Seder, the Rebbe says that is the 5th son that stands above everything else. If you have questions, Rabbi at the Chai Center, feel free to share, whether this video or at the Seder table gave you some food for thought. A happy and kosher Pesach. Go beyond your limits. That's what Pesach is all about.